Why was the radio silent for so long? That question hung in Captain Norah Hill's mind like a weight she couldn't shake. The desert night outside the operations tent was still, wind brushing over sand, generators humming, distant dogs barking somewhere beyond the wire. And then, the silence broke. "This is Convoy Alpha under fire. They have the colonel. Repeat, they have the colonel." Then static, then gunfire. Then nothing. Norah froze. Her hand hovered over the comm switch, her brain trying to process what she'd just heard. A minute ago, Colonel Marcus Hayes had been alive, leading his convoy back from inspection. Standard route, minimal risk. Now, that single sentence had shattered the calm of the night and replaced it with something sharp and cold. She called again into the mic, voice tight but steady. "Convoy Alpha, this is Hill. Say again, what's your situation?" No reply. Only dead air. Across the room, an intel sergeant swore under his breath. The site commander, Major Wallace, looked up from his terminal, already pale. "Confirm the coordinates," Norah said. "Grid reference November Victor 478321, the sergeant read. "That's 15 clicks northeast. Sir, that's deep in gray territory." Gray territory, meaning land that wasn't fully controlled by anyone. Meaning danger, ambushes, ghost towns, and enemies that vanished into the sand as easily as they appeared. Norah stared at the blinking cursor on the radio screen. The colonel had been taken, and she knew exactly what that meant. Hostage, torture, propaganda. It always followed the same pattern. She'd seen the videos before, American prisoners on their knees, faces swollen and bruised, enemy fighters reading from a script before the camera faded to black. If they followed the same playbook, Hayes had maybe 4 hours. Major Wallace was already moving through the checklists. "Get higher command on the line. Task Force Alpha, Special Ops, whoever's awake, will coordinate a rescue package." He was calm, methodical, the kind of officer who believed in procedures. The kind who did everything by the book, because the book had worked for 1,000 operations before. Norah knew the process too. Submit intel reports. Assemble QRF. Wait for approval. Wait for confirmation. Wait for authorization. Wait. And while they waited, Colonel Hayes would die. She looked at the tactical map pinned to the wall, a digital projection of northern Syria, lines and markers shifting in green light. The compound 15 kilometers out, the route the convoy had taken, the ambush point. It was all too clean, too precise. Somebody had leaked the route. Her jaw clenched. Hayes wasn't just her commander. He'd been her mentor, the man who'd taken a chance on her when no one else believed a woman could lead a combat platoon. 3 years earlier, she'd been a newly minted lieutenant straight out of Ranger School, young, sharp, and already exhausted by the whispers. "She'll wash out. She's just a quota. She won't last." She'd heard it all. And then Colonel Hayes had called her into his office. He hadn't smiled. He hadn't softened his tone. "Lieutenant Hill, I don't care if you're male, female, or Martian," he'd said. "I care if you can lead soldiers in combat. Can you?" "Yes, sir." "Then prove it, every day. Some people in this battalion don't think you belong here. Make them wrong." She had. She'd led patrols through 2 deployments. She made calls that had saved lives and cost her sleep. She'd earned respect, the kind you don't get from speeches but from bleeding the same dust and fear as your soldiers. And Hayes had been there guiding her, sharpening her, holding her to a higher standard than anyone else. He never said much, but his belief in her was a quiet force that carried her through every failure, every doubt. Now he was out there. Bound, captured, waiting. Major Wallace was packing. "We can't move yet. We need confirmation of his location. We can't risk an extraction team walking into an ambush." Norah's eyes flicked to the intel feed. Her local sources, the ones she'd cultivated over months, were already lighting up. A sympathetic villager, a smuggler with a drone. They'd sent her coordinates and photos within minutes. A small fortified compound, trucks with mounted guns, 20 armed fighters, and one hostage bound and guarded. "Sir," she said quietly, "we've got a visual. Hayes is alive. He's in that compound." Wallace didn't even look at her. "I appreciate that, Captain, but you know protocol. We wait for Special Operations Command." "He doesn't have time for that." "That's not your call." He was right officially. But she also knew that by the time the right people approved the right plan through the right channels, the only thing Special Operations would be recovering would be a body. She turned back to the map. 15 kilometers. If she left now, she could be there before dawn. She could get in, do what needed to be done, and get him out. The thought wasn't madness, it was calculation. She ran the numbers: distance, terrain, weapon loadout, ammo, night vision range. She'd been trained for exactly this, just not authorized for it. When she looked up again, Wallace was on another call, his back turned. The sergeant was pulling satellite imagery. The ops room was chaos, voices, screens, motion, but no one was watching her. Norah picked up her rifle case. No one noticed her leave. Outside, the Syrian night was cold and endless. The stars stretched across the desert sky like silver shrapnel. The hum of generators faded as she walked toward the motor pool. Her M4 was customized, balanced trigger, optics aligned, barrel wrapped in sandtone tape to reduce glare. 6 magazines, 210 rounds, a small medical kit, 1 breaching charge, 1 radio, and the quiet conviction that if she didn't go, no one would. The gate guard spotted her coming. He looked barely 20. "Ma'am, I don't have you on the movement log." "Emergency supply run to Outpost Delta," she said smoothly. "Got the call from higher." He hesitated, just long enough for her heart to quicken. But young soldiers rarely questioned officers who walked like they knew exactly where they were going. "Yes, ma'am, safe travels." "Thank you, specialist." She climbed into a civilian pickup, unmarked, local plates, and rolled through the gate. The compound lights shrank in the rearview mirror. Ahead, the desert stretched wide and black. She drove with the windows down, the night air cutting sharp against her skin. The engine's low hum was the only sound, every vibration amplified by the knowledge that she was on her own now. 15 kilometers. The kind of distance that could feel infinite when you were driving toward hell. She switched to night vision. The world turned green, roads glowing faint, dunes rising like shadows of ghosts. Every village she passed was dark, asleep, unaware, or pretending to be. Her mind stayed fixed on Hayes. On what he must be thinking, if he was thinking at all. When they'd first met, he'd told her something she'd never forgotten. "Leadership isn't about being fearless, Hill. It's about doing your duty even when you're terrified." She laughed back then. She wasn't laughing now. The GPS flickered, cheap local system half broken. She adjusted course by memory, by instinct. Every bend, every ridge was etched into her mind from past patrols. She could almost feel the terrain, sense the slope of the earth beneath the tires. 40 minutes later, she reached the final ridge before the target zone. She cut the engine. The silence hit like a punch. The compound lay below, a cluster of mud brick walls and tin roofs bathed in pale moonlight. She could see movement, guards on the walls, cigarette tips glowing. 2 trucks with mounted guns parked in the courtyard. And through the window of the main building, a figure sitting, hands bound. Hayes. Her heart kicked once hard. He was alive. She took a deep breath, adjusted her optic, and studied every pattern of movement. 6 visible guards, probably double inside. 20 total. Not impossible, just improbable. She thought of the standard wisdom drilled into every soldier. Never go alone, Always coordinate, wait for support. And then she thought of Hayes sitting there, waiting for a rescue that would never come in time. She whispered to herself, almost like a prayer, "Screw the rule book." She began to plan silently, methodically. Targets first, wall guards, gunners, probable leaders, then breach points, entry sequence, extraction route. It wasn't courage that drove her, it was clarity, the kind that comes when fear stops mattering. She checked her rifle one last time, magazine seated, chamber loaded. Then she did something she hadn't planned. She keyed her radio. "This is Captain Hill," she said softly. "Solo direct action on hostile compound at grid reference November Victor 478321. Multiple hostiles, attempting hostage extraction. If you're hearing this, send support. If not, tell my family I went down swinging. Hill out." She left the radio behind the ridge. If she didn't make it back, someone would at least know where to start looking. The eastern horizon was starting to pale, dawn crawling toward her, slow and merciless. She had maybe 30 minutes before the first light gave her away. She moved forward, every step deliberate, controlled. The sand shifted under her boots. The air was cold enough to sting her lungs. At 300 meters she went prone, scoped in. The first guard on the wall yawned, leaned his rifle against the parapet. Norah exhaled slowly. Squeezed the trigger. A suppressed crack. The guard folded, soundless. The second turned, confused. Another shot, another fall. 2 down, 18 to go. She advanced, using an old irrigation ditch for cover. Her breathing was steady, but her heartbeat roared in her ears. Somewhere ahead a dog barked, then silence again. By the time she reached the wall, the sky was turning gray, a ghost of morning pushing at the horizon. She knelt, unpacked her thermite breaching charge, and pressed it against the mud brick. It hissed softly as it began to burn, molten light spilling across the ground. 10 seconds. Then a hole wide enough for one person. Norah shouldered her rifle, took one breath, and stepped through. Inside, chaos waited. Shouts in Arabic, boots slapping against concrete, the metallic echo of rifles being loaded. Norah moved fast, low, firing controlled pairs. The first 2 fighters dropped before they even knew where the shots were coming from. A third spun, spraying bullets wildly. She ducked, rolled, came up firing. 6 down, 14 to go. She was running on instinct now, muscle memory, training, and that cold, clear place in her mind where there was no room for fear. Every shot mattered. Every second counted. And somewhere inside that compound, a man she respected more than anyone was waiting for her. She could already hear the shouting near the main building. She knew what that meant. They were moving him. The air inside the compound was thick smoke, gunpowder, sweat, fear. Norah moved through it like a ghost, her breathing steady, her senses razor-sharp. Every instinct screamed at her to hurry. But haste was death. The compound was waking up, fighters shouting in Arabic, boots scraping on concrete, the clatter of weapons being loaded. Her shots had announced something unnatural, a professional moving through their walls with impossible precision. She flattened against a doorway, rifle tight to her shoulder. 2 fighters rushed past, not seeing her. She let them go. Engaging now would give away her position. Her eyes tracked every flicker of movement, every sound. A metal door slamming, voices raised in confusion. Then one word she recognized even through the accent. Amriki. American. They knew. She eased around the corner, muzzle first. A narrow hallway stretched ahead, mud brick walls, a single flickering bulb, 2 bodies already on the ground from her first burst. She stepped over them carefully, boots silent, weapon steady. Somewhere beyond this hallway was Colonel Hayes. Norah's mind split in 2, one part tactical, calculating angles and movement. the other emotional, remembering a face she couldn't lose. Hayes wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be home in Virginia, teaching strategy at some war college, writing books about leadership and honor, not tied to a chair in a hostile compound 15 kilometers from friendly lines. Her anger sharpened her focus. She reached a corner, peered around, a small open courtyard. 5 men, all armed, one adjusting a heavy machine gun on a truck bed. She could flank them, 2 left, 3 right if she was fast. Norah dropped to a knee, controlled her breathing, then fired. 1, 2, 3. All headshots. The other 2 scrambled for cover. She shifted, fired again. 5 down. Rounds sparked off the wall near her face. She ducked, moved laterally. Her boots slid in sand and blood. She found cover behind a stone trough, reloaded by touch, mag out, mag in, bolt forward, and peeked again. One fighter leaned out, muzzle flashing. Norah fired, he dropped. The courtyard fell silent again. She exhaled, low and steady. Not from relief, from discipline. She'd been in fights like this before. You didn't celebrate surviving one corner because another waited 10 feet away. Then she heard it, muffled voices. Inside the main building. She pressed her ear against the wooden door. 2 guards talking, one nervous, the other confident, and behind them a sound that stopped her cold. A cough. Hoarse, broken, human. Hayes. Norah's pulse quickened, her throat tightening in a way that surprised her. She'd prepared for this, trained for this, but hearing him alive turned everything inside her into something raw and personal. She pulled a flashbang from her vest, checked the pin. Deep breath. Then kick. The door flew open, wood splintering. She tossed the grenade in. A sharp pop, white light. By the time the sound faded, both guards were down, one bleeding, one blind and screaming. She moved fast, silencing the second with a clean shot. And there he was. Colonel Marcus Hayes, hands bound behind a chair, blood on his temple but alive. His eyes squinted against the flash, then widened as he recognized her. Hill, his voice was rough, disbelief cutting through it. Hold still, sir, she said, already cutting the cords. What the hell are you? Later, we move now. She pulled him up, half supporting his weight. He was weak but steady enough to stand. He looked at her gear, her rifle, the calm in her movements. You came alone. Yes, sir. That's insane, I know. Gunfire cracked outside. The enemy had regrouped. She pushed Hayes toward the doorway, rifle raised. Rounds ripped through the air, slamming into walls. She shoved him down, returning fire in quick, controlled bursts. One fighter dropped, then another. She was running low. Sir, do you see a weapon? Hayes pointed toward a fallen AK. She grabbed it, checked the mag half full, and shoved it into his hands. You remember how to use one of those. Hill, I trained people who wrote the manual. Then let's move. They sprinted into the courtyard, ducking behind a wrecked truck as another burst of automatic fire shredded the air where they'd just been. Dust, smoke, chaos. Norah popped up, fired twice, dropped a machine gunner on the rooftop. Hayes covered her, taking out another guard near the gate. It was working. They were winning. Until the unmistakable whoosh of an RPG tore the air. The rocket hit the far wall, sending a shockwave of debris and sand. Norah hit the ground hard, ears ringing. When the sound returned, it came muffled, gunfire, shouts, the groan of collapsing structure. She pushed herself up, dazed. Hayes was beside her, bleeding from a cut but alive. They were pinned. Options, he shouted over the chaos. Flank left, breach the side gate, she called back. We'll be exposed. We're exposed now. She tossed a grenade toward the cluster of fighters near the main gate, counted. 1, 2, 3. Boom! The explosion tore through the defenders, smoke billowing thick and hot. Move! They ran, bent low, sprinting through the dust, cutting around the corner. The side gate loomed ahead, half open, one guard reloading. Norah shot him mid-motion. They burst through into open desert. Freedom! For about 3 seconds. A truck engine roared to life behind them, one of the technicals. Its mounted gun swung toward them, spitting a stream of tracers. Norah and Hayes dove behind a low ridge as the sand exploded around them. "We can't outrun it," Hayes said. "We're not going to." She peeked, saw the truck closing fast, 50 meters, then 40. She aimed for the gunner. One shot missed. Second shot hit. The gunner slumped, the weapon falling silent. But the driver kept coming, intent on running them down. Norah dropped her empty mag, slammed in another. Fired through the windshield. The truck veered, swerved, and crashed into a ditch, flames blooming from its hood. She didn't look back. "We keep moving." They ran, two shadows against the rising dawn, the horizon bleeding orange and gold. 15 minutes. That's all they needed to reach the truck she'd hidden behind the ridge. 15 minutes to survive. Every step was pain now. Hayes limped, his breathing shallow. Norah slowed just enough to keep him upright, scanning constantly for movement. Her rifle was nearly empty. One magazine left. They crested the ridge, and there it was, the pickup truck, still hidden, still intact. Norah helped Hayes into the passenger seat and climbed behind the wheel. She turned the key. The engine sputtered once, twice, then roared. They drove hard, tires tearing through sand. The sun broke over the horizon, blinding, golden, merciless. For the first time in hours, Norah allowed herself to breathe. Hayes leaned back, eyes half closed. His voice was rough. "You just assaulted a fortified compound, killed 20 fighters, and pulled me out alone." "Yes, sir." "Without authorization, without backup." "Also yes." He gave a short, incredulous laugh. "That's either the bravest or dumbest thing I've seen in 30 years." "Probably both, sir." For a few seconds, they just drove, silence filling the space where adrenaline had been. Then Norah keyed her radio. "This is Captain Hill. Package recovered. Requesting extraction at grid reference November Victor 478321. Static, then a voice she recognized. "Hill, is that you? Jesus, we thought you were. Where the hell did you stand by? Air assets en route." She looked at Hayes. He smiled faintly. "You'll have some explaining to do." "I know. And paperwork, so much paperwork." "I'll live." He looked at her again, eyes steady. "You saved my life, Norah." "Just doing my job, sir." "No, you did more than that." They reached the extraction point, an empty crossroads cutting through endless desert. Norah parked the truck, scanning the horizon. Minutes passed, then the low, distant thrum of rotors. 2 Apache gunships first, circling high, their shadows sliding across the dunes. Then a Black Hawk descending fast, kicking up a storm of sand. Norah helped Hayes to his feet, guiding him toward the helicopter. The crew chief reached down, pulling them both aboard. As they lifted off, Norah finally looked back, the compound now a shrinking smear of smoke on the horizon. For the first time, the enormity of what she'd done hit her. She'd gone alone. Without orders. Without backup. And won. The adrenaline drained out of her all at once. Her hands trembled. She stared out the open door as the desert rolled beneath them. She'd done what was right, not what was allowed. The moral lines blurred somewhere between those shots and that extraction, but one thing stayed clear in her mind. If she hadn't gone, Hayes would be dead. And that she could never have lived with. Back at base, the reception was chaos. Medics rushed Hayes to treatment. Intelligence officers swarmed her for debriefs. Cameras from classified drones replayed her assault in stunned silence, one soldier moving through 20 enemies with the precision of a full team. But Norah didn't hear any of it. She just sat on the hood of a Humvee, staring at the dawn she'd fought through, feeling the exhaustion crash over her like a wave. Major Wallace approached, face unreadable. "Captain Hill," he said flatly, "do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yes, sir, I brought the colonel home." "You also violated about 50 regulations and conducted an unauthorized combat operation." "Understood, sir." "You're going to face an investigation." "Yes, sir." "And probably a court-martial." "If that's what it takes." He studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "You realize, if this had gone wrong, we'd be burying 2 officers instead of 1. "Yes, sir." "But it didn't." "No, sir." For the first time, Wallace looked almost human. "Get cleaned up, Hill. Command wants to talk to you, and good work." She nodded once. "Thank you, sir." As he walked away, Norah looked toward the rising sun. The desert wind carried faint echoes, smoke, dust, the lingering ghosts of what had just happened. She wasn't a hero, she didn't feel like one. She was just a soldier who'd refused to wait while a good man died. Later, when Hayes was stable, she visited him in the field hospital. He looked pale, bandaged, but alive. "You shouldn't have come," he said quietly. "You'd have done the same for me." "That's not the point." "Then what is?" He paused, then smiled faintly. "You proved something tonight, that sometimes courage doesn't wait for permission." She didn't know what to say. So she just nodded. Outside, the night was turning to gold again, the endless horizon glowing like something sacred. Norah took a deep breath, the weight of it all settling over her, the danger, the choices, the consequences still waiting. But under it all, a quiet certainty. She'd done what she had to do. Because sometimes, dignity doesn't shout. It acts quietly, completely, without hesitation. And somewhere out there in the dawn, the world felt just a little safer because of it. The dust had barely settled before the questions began. Not whispered ones, official ones. Recorded, transcribed, dissected by men in uniforms 2 ranks above hers. 3 days after the rescue, Captain Norah Hill found herself sitting in a cold, windowless briefing room. The air smelled of stale coffee and power, the kind of room where decisions about people's lives were made by those who'd never seen the sand or the blood up close. Across from her sat a panel of officers, ribbons, polished insignia, and blank expressions. An investigation board. The kind that decided whether you were a hero or a cautionary tale. The lights were too bright. Her uniform was spotless, but her boots still carried a thin dust from Syria's soil, a quiet reminder of where she'd come from and what she'd done. The 2-star general at the center spoke first. "Captain Hill, do you understand the nature of this inquiry?" "Yes, sir." "You conducted a solo direct action raid on an enemy compound without authorization, without support, and without notifying your commanding officer." "Correct, sir." "Resulting in 20 enemy combatants killed, 1 American officer rescued, and 0 friendly casualties." "Also correct, sir." He paused. Even he couldn't hide the smallest flicker of surprise at that last part. "Let's start from the beginning," he said. "Why did you go?" Norah's eyes didn't waver. "Because Colonel Hayes didn't have time to wait." A colonel in the corner leaned forward. "You realize, Captain, that acting without orders is a direct violation of operational protocol." "Yes, sir." "And that such violations undermine the chain of command." "Understood, sir." "Then why?" She hesitated, not because she didn't have an answer, but because she wanted to say it right. Because when the system moves slower than the situation, Someone has to move first. Silence. The kind that said they weren't sure whether to write that down or pretend they hadn't heard it. The general leaned back. You risked your life and the mission. You disobeyed orders, but you succeeded. You understand how difficult that makes this situation for us. Yes, sir. He studied her for a moment, fingers tapping the table. Then he nodded toward the projector. Play the footage. A drone feed appeared on the screen, grainy, black and white, time-stamped. The compound, the firefight. One figure moving alone through 20 armed men, methodical and lethal, never once hesitating. The board watched in silence. At one point, one of the officers whispered something like Jesus Christ. Then the explosion near the main gate, the extraction, the truck speeding through the desert. And finally the two of them, Hill and Hayes, climbing aboard the Black Hawk. The footage froze. The room stayed silent for a long time. Then the general spoke again. That was you. Yes, sir. You realize that operation would normally require a 12-person assault team, at least 2 vehicles, and air support. Yes, sir. And yet you executed it alone. Yes, sir. He rubbed his temples. You're either a tactical genius or a lunatic. With respect, sir, she said softly, sometimes it's the same thing. A few of the officers smiled despite themselves, but no one said anything. Later that night, Norah sat alone in her quarters. Outside, the base buzzed with distant life. Engines, voices, the hum of the world continuing without her. Her rifle leaned against the wall, clean and disassembled. Her hands itched to put it back together, not out of need but habit. Every soldier had their ritual. For her, it was control, the comfort of assembling something that always worked the way it should. Unlike people, unlike systems. Her thoughts drifted to Hayes. He was recovering, stable. She hadn't seen him since the debriefs began. They'd kept her separate, maybe to prevent influence, maybe to keep the story clean. Still, she could hear his voice in her head. That calm authority that had shaped her entire career. Prove you belong. She had. And now she might lose everything because of it. On the second day, they called in witnesses. Communications staff, intelligence officers, the gate guard who'd let her through. Each told the same story. Captain Hill left at 400 hours, no authorization, no escort, and came back at sunrise with Colonel Hayes alive and 20 hostiles dead. The gate guard, a young specialist, looked terrified when they asked him why he let her go. She said it was an emergency run to Outpost Delta, he stammered. She sounded confident, sir. I didn't think to question it. Do you understand your actions could have led to multiple casualties? Yes, sir. And do you understand they also led to the successful rescue of a senior officer? The specialist blinked, uncertain. Yes, sir. Even the general had to suppress a smile. The next witness was Hayes. He entered the room with a slight limp and a face that carried new lines. His uniform was immaculate, ribbons gleaming, but his eyes told another story, exhaustion, gratitude, something deeper. He took the oath, sat down, and looked directly at Norah. Colonel Hayes, the general began, you understand you're under oath. I do. Describe what happened from your perspective. Hayes's voice was quiet, measured, like a man who told this story too many times in his own head already. We were ambushed on Route Red, professional ambush, RPGs overlapping fire zones. My security detail fought hard, but we were overrun. I was captured and taken to a compound northeast of the engagement area. I was interrogated, beaten. They were preparing to record a video. Execution propaganda. I'd seen it before. He paused, swallowing. Then I heard something strange outside. Gunfire, controlled bursts, not panic fire, trained, precise. Then the shouting started. One of my captors ran to the door. He didn't make it 2 steps before someone shot him. The room was silent. Everyone knew who that someone was. She came through the door, Hayes said. Alone, moving like she'd done it 1,000 times. No backup, no hesitation. Cut my restraints, told me to move. I did. We fought our way out. 20 hostiles neutralized. No civilians harmed. We reached her exfil truck and drove 15 kilometers under fire. He looked straight at the general. Captain Hill didn't just save my life. She executed a mission that would have required a full special operations team perfectly. She didn't disobey orders out of ego. She did it because the rest of us were still filling out forms. The general frowned slightly. Colonel, are you condoning unauthorized action? I'm acknowledging that sometimes, sir, courage outruns protocol. No one dared respond. After Hayes left, the board recessed. Norah sat in silence, staring at her hands. They didn't shake. They never did. But inside, something uneasy was growing, not regret, but awareness. There was a cost to what she'd done. Even if they promoted her, even if they pinned a medal to her chest, something fundamental had changed. She crossed a line. And once you crossed it, you could never really go back. On the 3rd morning, they called her in for the verdict. The same sterile room, the same panel. But this time the air felt different, heavier, charged with something unseen. The general looked at her, hands folded on the table. Captain Hill, what you did was reckless, unauthorized, and a blatant violation of multiple operational directives. Yes, sir. It was also tactically brilliant, executed with extraordinary skill, and resulted in the rescue of a senior officer without friendly loss. He paused, long enough for her heartbeat to fill the silence. Frankly, we should court-martial you. Yes, sir. But instead, he slid a document across the table. Effective immediately, you are promoted to Major, Special Operations Command. You'll report to a classified unit in 2 weeks. Norah blinked. Not because she hadn't imagined surviving this, but because she hadn't imagined being rewarded for it. Sir, with respect. Don't thank me yet, the general interrupted. You're being reassigned to a direct action team that handles exactly this kind of mission, the kind that doesn't exist on paper. You wanted to prove you could operate at the highest level. Congratulations, you just volunteered. Her throat tightened. Not with fear, with something like disbelief. Understood, sir. One more thing, the general said, almost smiling. Next time you decide to start a one-woman war, at least leave a note. My heart can't take finding out afterward. A ripple of restrained laughter filled the room. Even Norah smiled. That night, she stood outside under the stars. The desert was quiet again, the same landscape that had watched her cross into the unknown only days before. Now, it watched her cross into something else entirely. A new kind of war. The kind fought in shadows, where rules bent, and morality was a weapon as sharp as any blade. She thought of Hayes, alive because she hadn't waited. She thought of the 20 men she'd killed, faces she'd never see again but would never quite forget. And she thought of what it meant, the thin line between duty and defiance. Maybe courage wasn't loud. Maybe it wasn't medals or speeches or history books. Maybe courage was just the quiet voice that said go when everyone else said wait. When the dawn came again, she didn't salute it. She just watched. The same desert sun that had risen over fire and death now rose over something new. A woman who had broken every rule that night, and proven that sometimes breaking them was the only way to keep faith with what they stood for. The orders came in a plain envelope. No emblem, no insignia, just her name typed in black. Major Norah Hill. Inside, a single line. Report to Task Force Eclipse. Location undisclosed, clearance level Omega. No signatures. No explanations, just coordinates that didn't exist on any map. She left Syria under a cloudless dawn. The helicopter carried her west, engines roaring against a sky that looked too calm for what she felt inside. Below, the desert stretched forever, a wasteland of dunes and ghosts. She entered that land a captain and walked out a major. But the promotion felt less like recognition and more like a summons. At the forward airbase, no one congratulated her. No handshakes, no ceremony. Just silent nods from soldiers who'd heard the story. The one-woman raid, 20 dead, 1 rescued. She could feel it in their eyes, respect mingled with unease. Because they all knew what her story really meant, that sometimes the system fails, and someone has to break it to make things right. 2 flights later, she landed somewhere in the Mediterranean, a base that technically didn't exist. Concrete runways disguised as shipping lanes. Hangars marked with civilian logos. No flags. No unit patches. A man met her at the tarmac. Tall, broad-shouldered, late 40s. The kind of calm that came from decades of operations most people would never read about. Major Hill. Yes, sir. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Rains. Welcome to Eclipse. He didn't offer a handshake, just turned and started walking. She followed. You've read my file? She asked. I've read the headlines, he said without turning. You broke every rule in the book and succeeded anyway. Command thinks that makes you useful. And you? I think it makes you dangerous. They entered a long hallway, walls lined with mission plaques stripped of names. Just places, dates. Iraq 2015, Somalia 2018, Niger 2021. Each one a whisper of something that never officially happened. At the end of the hall, a steel door slid open to reveal a small briefing room. 5 operators sat waiting, men and women dressed in plain fatigues, no insignia, no ranks visible. Rains gestured. Team 1, this is Major Hill. Some of you have heard of her. She conducted a solo rescue op in Syria last month. 20 hostiles down, no friendlies lost. A low whistle came from one corner. The others just studied her, measured her. Rains continued. She's joining you as tactical lead. Questions? Silence. Then a man with a scar down his cheek leaned back. Yeah, what's she proving this time? That she can do our job alone. A few chuckles followed, the kind that carried edge more than humor. Norah didn't react, she just met his eyes. No, she said quietly, just here to do it better. The laughter stopped. Rain smirked. You'll fit in fine. Over the next weeks, she learned what Eclipse really was. A patchwork of intelligence, special operations, and ghosts. They handled missions that even black-budget units denied, hostage extractions, sabotage, covert strikes. The kind of operations where failure didn't make headlines, because failure didn't officially exist. The team was small, 8 operators total, each with scars the rest of the world couldn't see. There was Vega, the scarred one, former SEAL. Sado demolitions, quiet, terrifyingly precise. Mendez, medic ex-Delta, carried humor like armor. Core sniper, eyes like glass, never missed. And now Hill, the outsider with the impossible story. They didn't trust her at first. How could they? She was the cautionary tale they'd all heard about, the officer who went rogue and got rewarded for it. But trust wasn't given here. It was earned in blood and silence. Her first operation with Eclipse came 2 weeks later. Somalia, night raid on a compound holding an American aid worker. Standard insertion, halo jump, 2-kilometer approach, silent breach. Except nothing in Eclipse was standard. They moved like shadows, no comms chatter, no wasted motion. Every breath timed, every step rehearsed. For Norah, it was both familiar and foreign. Familiar, the rhythm of danger. Foreign, the absolute absence of command. Here she was ma'am, she was just Hill. And here, everyone was expected to think like commanders. Halfway to the target, Sato whispered over comms. Patrol 10 o'clock, 2 hostiles. Ignore, Vega murmured. They'll pass. Negative, Norah replied. They'll cross our exfil route in 5 minutes. Take them quietly. A pause. Then Vega's voice, low and sharp. You're giving orders now. Before she could answer, the patrol turned directly toward them. Sato moved first, knife flashing once, twice. 2 bodies dropped without a sound. Vega looked at her. Lucky guess. Calculated, she said. When they reached the compound, it was Norah who spotted the tripwire, thin as spider silk, stretched across the main door. She halted the team with a raised hand. Secondary entrance, east wall, she whispered. Single guard, cigarette in his left hand. Vega frowned. You can see that. No, she said, I can smell it. Cor grinned faintly through her scope. She's staying. They breached through the east wall, extracted the hostage, and were airborne before dawn. No casualties, no alarms, no evidence they were ever there. When the Black Hawk cleared the coastline, Vega turned to her. You good at reading people, Hill? Depends on the people. Then read this, he extended his hand. Nice work. She shook it. That was how trust was built here, one mission at a time. Weeks turned into months. Hill adapted. The missions blurred together. Iraq, Yemen, Jordan. Places she'd only known from maps now burned into memory. She stopped counting the nights she didn't sleep. Stopped checking calendars. Time in eclipse wasn't measured in days, only in missions and losses avoided. Sometimes, though, in the quiet between flights, she'd catch her reflection in the window of a transport plane. The same eyes, the same uniform. But something behind them had changed. The rules that once defined her career were gone now. And without them, she had to redefine herself from scratch. Was she a hero, a soldier, or just someone who'd learned how to survive when permission wasn't an option? One evening, Rains called her into his office. The blinds were closed, the lights dim. A map glowed on the screen, lines of red stretching across northern Iraq. Intel just confirmed a high-value target, he said. ISIS remnant, responsible for the ambush that captured Hayes. Her pulse slowed, not from fear, but something heavier. You're sure? Positive. Satellite imagery, comm intercepts, the same cell, you'll lead the strike. For a long moment, she didn't answer. The thought of returning there, the same kind of compound, the same kind of sand, churned something deep inside. Sir, she said quietly, why me? Because you have unfinished business. He didn't have to say it, she already knew. This wasn't about revenge. It was about closure. 3 nights later, Task Force Eclipse deployed. Insertion was clean. The desert again, endless and indifferent. But this time, Norah wasn't alone. They moved in staggered formation, Vega left flank, Core overwatch, Sato on breach, Norah in command. Through her scope, she saw the compound, almost identical to the one from Syria. Mud walls, guard towers, the same flicker of cheap lanterns. For a second, her mind pulled her backward, gunfire, smoke, Hayes's voice shouting through the chaos. She blinked it away. Not tonight. Hill, your call, Vega murmured. She studied the patterns. Same mistakes, same arrogance. Take the walls first, she said. No warnings, no survivors. They struck like lightning. Silent kills, suppressed shots, every motion precise, rehearsed, merciless. In under 7 minutes, the compound was cleared. When the last shot faded, Norah stood in the courtyard. Same smell, same dust. But this time, the ghosts weren't hers. Rains's voice came through comms. Objective secured, package destroyed, good work, Eclipse. Vega approached, rifle slung. "How's it feel, boss, coming full circle?" She looked around at the fires flickering in the night wind. "Like closing a door," she said softly, "one that should have stayed open." He frowned, meaning we never really leave these places. We just visit them again under new names. He didn't answer, just nodded because he understood. They all did. When they returned to base, Rains called for a debrief. He didn't talk about kills or metrics, just results. Then he said something that caught her off guard. "You've been here 6 months, Hill. The team trusts you, I trust you, but tell me something, do you trust yourself?" She didn't answer right away. Then quietly, "I trust the mission." He studied her for a long time. That's not the same thing. He wasn't wrong. That night, alone in her quarters, she held the challenge coin Hayes had given her, the one etched with her impossible raid. 1 operator, 20 enemies, 0 given. She traced the edge with her thumb, remembering his words. Remember that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite fear. She realized something then. Courage wasn't what had driven her that night. It was loyalty. It was love, not romantic, but something older, purer. The kind that binds soldiers to one another beyond orders and rank. She placed the coin back in her pocket and looked out the window. Somewhere out there, other battles waited. Other impossible calls. And she knew deep down that if the moment came again, if it meant saving one life, defying one more order, she'd do it again. Without hesitation. Without regret. Because sometimes the fight doesn't end when the mission does. It just changes shape. The days began to blur together. Not because the missions were the same, but because the rhythm of secrecy erased time itself. Eat, brief, deploy, return, repeat. Task Force Eclipse didn't celebrate victories. They just logged them and moved on. Each success existed for a moment, then vanished behind redacted reports and encrypted files. But for Norah Hill, the victories were starting to feel different. Less like triumphs, more like echoes. It was sometime in spring when she noticed the shift. The younger operators, new recruits rotated in from Ranger Regiment and recon units, started watching her the way she once watched Hayes. Quietly, curiously, like they were trying to decode what it meant to be fearless and human at the same time. She didn't ask for that attention, but she felt its weight all the same. Because she remembered what it was like to be them. Hungry, uncertain, convinced courage was the same as noise. Now she knew better. Courage wasn't loud. It was the silence between orders, the moment before the choice. Their next mission was in the mountains of northern Jordan. Simple, brief. Intercept a convoy carrying chemical precursors bound for insurgent networks. Simple on paper anyway. The team was mixed, veterans and rookies. Among them, a young sergeant named Cole Ramirez, 26, built like a wall, with that restless energy of soldiers who hadn't yet seen enough to understand what they were risking. He reminded her of herself. Before the wait, before the ghosts. In the pre-mission briefing, he asked one question too many. "Ma'am, what if intel's wrong? What if this isn't a weapons convoy?" Norah looked up from the satellite images. "Then we adapt." Meaning we deal with whatever we find and make sure everyone comes home. He nodded, but she caught the flicker of doubt in his eyes. It wasn't rebellion. It was youth, the belief that there was always time to hesitate, to double-check, to wait. She once believed that too. They deployed at night, 4 vehicles across a dry wadi, headlights off. The desert here was different from Syria, sharper, colder. The wind whispered across the rocks like the desert itself was keeping score. Norah sat in the lead truck, scanning through night vision lenses. Vega drove. Sato rode shotgun, his silence a constant comfort. The convoy appeared right on time, 3 civilian trucks, 1 escort vehicle. No insignia, no visible weapons. Raines's voice came over comms. Hill, confirm cargo before engagement. She zoomed in crates. Unmarked covered. But there was something off. The spacing, the driver's posture, the way the escort vehicle hugged the rear too close. It's them, she said. Confirm. I'm confirming. She didn't hesitate. Eclipse execute. Gunfire cracked across the valley, short, controlled bursts. The escort vehicle exploded first. Flames lit the cliffs in orange waves. The lead truck skidded sideways, doors flying open. Men scrambled out, rifles in hand. No civilians, no aid workers. Armed combatants. Her gut had been right. In under 90 seconds, it was over. No friendly casualties, no surprises. When they breached the cargo, the chemical drums were there, proof of everything Intel had claimed. Raines's voice came again. Good work, Eclipse. Exfil and destroy the cargo. Back at base, they gathered in the dim light of the operations tent. Vega leaned against the wall, sipping black coffee. Sato methodically cleaned his rifle. Ramirez sat at the far end, silent. Norah noticed. The stillness wasn't discipline, it was conflict. After the others left, she approached him. You did good out there. He didn't look up. We killed 6 men tonight, ma'am. They were moving chemical weapons. I know, it's just, he hesitated, searching for words. I thought I'd feel something different, pride maybe, satisfaction. She sat down across from him. You don't ever feel good about it, Ramirez. You just learn to feel right about it. And what if it stops feeling right? Then you start counting the reasons you joined in the first place. He finally met her eyes. What if I don't remember them anymore? That question stayed with her long after he walked away. Weeks passed. More missions, more ghosts. But Ramirez's words wouldn't leave her alone. Maybe because she saw in him what Hayes had once seen in her, that fragile balance between purpose and doubt. And maybe because, for the first time in years, she wasn't sure she could still list her own reasons either. Then came the operation that changed everything. Intelligence flagged a hostage cell in southern Iraq, civilians captured by an insurgent faction that had ambushed Allied forces. Among them, 2 American contractors. The order was clear: rescue the hostages, neutralize the cell. But the details were wrong from the start. Satellite imagery showed no guards outside. Thermal scans showed too few heat signatures for the size of the structure. It felt wrong. Too easy. Norah told Raines. Sir, this smells like bait. You're not wrong, he said, but the hostages are real, we can't leave them. She understood that logic. It was the same one that had driven her into Syria years ago. Then we go fast and quiet, she said. The night of the assault, everything went smooth, too smooth. They breached without resistance, cleared 2 rooms, then found the hostages, bound, terrified, alive. And then the click. Pressure plate. Hidden under the floor. Ramirez was closest. Ma'am. Norah's instincts kicked in. She lunged forward, grabbed him, yanked him down as the explosion tore through the room. The blast threw her against the wall. Her ears rang, dust filled the air. When her vision cleared, she saw the crater where Ramirez had stood. He was alive barely. Shrapnel in his chest, leg torn open. Medic, she shouted. Mendez slid in beside her, already unpacking the kit. He's bleeding out. Norah pressed her hand against the wound, her voice breaking through the chaos. Stay with me, Cole, look at me. His lips moved. She leaned closer. Was it worth it, ma'am? And then his eyes unfocused. The medevac arrived too late. Back at base, the silence in the hangar was absolute. The mission had been successful, hostages alive, target cell eliminated. But Eclipse had lost one of its own. Her first loss as a commander. Rains found her sitting on the tarmac hours later, the blood still on her gloves. "You saved 6 people tonight," he said quietly. "And lost one. You couldn't have known." "I did know," she whispered. "Something was wrong, I went anyway." He didn't argue. He just sat beside her. For a long time, neither spoke. Then he said something she hadn't expected. "You know why you're good at what you do, Hill? Because you act. You don't wait for permission, you move. But that part of you, the one that can't stop moving, it's also the part that'll break you if you let it." She looked at him. "Then what do I do?" "You remember that leadership isn't about being right. It's about carrying the weight when you're wrong." They buried Ramirez quietly. No uniforms, no press, no names on paper. Just the team, the desert wind, and a flag folded with silent hands. When the others left, Norah stayed behind. The sun was setting, gold bleeding into red. She placed her challenge coin on the sand beside his temporary marker. "You were brave, Cole," she said softly. "You asked the right questions, you made us better." The wind carried her words away, but she didn't need anyone to hear them. Some truths didn't need witnesses. That night she sat alone in her quarters again, the silence heavier than ever. She thought about the chain that connected her to Hayes, to Rains, to Ramirez. Mentor to student, leader to follower, and how each link in that chain carried both duty and grief. She finally understood something Hayes had once told her, something she hadn't truly heard back then. Command isn't about control, it's about consequence. Every choice echoed. Every life, every death, left an imprint that never quite faded. A week later, she addressed the new operators at Eclipse, recruits barely older than Ramirez had been. They stood at attention, fresh-faced, waiting for orders. But instead of giving them a lecture on tactics, she said something else. "You're going to hear stories about missions that don't exist," she began. "About operators who did the impossible. Don't believe them. What matters isn't how many enemies you kill or how clean the operation looks in a report. What matters is whether, at the end of it all, you can still look in a mirror and recognize the person staring back." The room was silent. No one moved. "You'll face moments where the right thing and the authorized thing won't match," she continued. "When that happens, you'll have to decide what kind of soldier you are, and you'll have to live with it forever." Her voice softened. "I've made those choices. Some I'd make again, some I wouldn't. But I learned one truth: courage isn't the opposite of fear. It's the decision to act while you're still afraid." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "That's what it means to serve." When the recruits left, Rains approached her quietly. "You sounded like Hayes today. Maybe I finally understood him. You're becoming what he was to you." She looked toward the horizon. "Then maybe that's how it's supposed to work." He nodded. "You know, Hill, you talk about fear a lot. You ever feel it?" She smiled faintly. "Every day, sir. I just learned not to let it make my choices for me." That night, as the base lights dimmed and the desert quieted again, Norah finally allowed herself to close her eyes. Not to sleep, but to remember. Faces, voices, promises. Hayes, Ramirez, every soldier she'd ever led. And one lingering truth that lived somewhere deep inside her. Sometimes, doing the right thing means losing something you can never replace. But you do it anyway because someone has to. The next mission didn't come with a briefing. It came with a whisper. A courier dropped a sealed envelope on Rain's desk at dawn. No markings, no insignia, just the words. "Eyes only, Major Hill." When Rains handed it to her, his face said more than the paper ever could. Whatever's in there, he muttered, it isn't simple. He wasn't wrong. Inside were 3 pages, typed, classified, sterile. But the second she read the first line, Norah felt her pulse slow. Target former Allied asset, codename Lancer. Objective terminate, location Eastern Turkey. Lancer. She knew that name. An ex-operative turned mercenary, once their own, now gone rogue. But deeper than that, buried under the ink of memory, was something colder. Lancer had been her source once, the one who'd fed her intel during the mission that saved Hayes. The one who'd risked his cover to help her find the compound. He'd saved her life back then. And now, Command wanted her to end his. In the operations tent, Rains waited. The map on the table glowed faintly, red lines crisscrossing the mountains near the Syrian border. They're saying he's selling intel, Rains said. Names, locations, equipment lists to the highest bidder. You believe that? I believe Command believes it. She studied the terrain, steep ridges, no roads, just scars of rock and snow. What's our window? 3 days, you Vega and Core, surgical strike. She hesitated. Permission to speak freely, sir. Always. He's not a target, he's a person who helped us. And now he's a liability. The way he said it, cold, detached, hit her harder than she expected. Because she used to sound like that too. Orders are orders, Hill, Rains said finally. You taught me not to hide behind that sentence. I taught you to make choices. This one's yours. She looked at him. If I go, I finish it my way. Understood. He didn't stop her. That was how Eclipse worked. Command gave orders. The operators decided what those orders really meant. They moved out the next morning. A small team, 3 people, 1 purpose. The air over Turkey bit deep, cold wind cutting through their gear. They traveled light, crossing ridgelines where eagles circled above the silence. For 2 days, they tracked the signal, faint bursts from a satellite phone, registered to a dozen fake identities. By the 3rd night, they found him. An abandoned outpost on the side of a cliff, stone walls, rusted gates, firelight flickering faintly through a shattered window. Core set up overwatch 400 meters out. Vega checked his rifle. Norah just stood there for a moment, staring through her scope at a man sitting by a fire. Lancer looked older. Beard, weathered face, stillness that came from too many years waiting for someone to come end it. Target in sight, Core whispered. Confirmed, Vega replied. You want me to take the shot? Norah didn't answer right away. She could have said yes, it would have been clean, efficient, easy. But easy wasn't why she'd come. No, she said finally, I'm going in. The climb down was brutal. Sharp rocks, ice underfoot, wind like knives. Every instinct told her to stay distant, to do it by the book, to make it just another mission. But something inside refused. When she reached the outpost, Lancer was waiting. Not armed. Just sitting, watching the flames. You took your time, he said quietly without turning. You knew I was coming. Someone always comes. He glanced back, his eyes tired but clear. They send you because you'd make it quick. They sent me because I'd make it right. He smiled faintly. Still believe in right and wrong, Hill? She didn't answer. Because truthfully, she wasn't sure anymore. He tossed a small object toward her, a dog tag. Her own handwriting scratched into the back. Operation Falcon, 2024. The mission that had saved Hayes. You dropped that, he said. Kept it, souvenir, I guess. Why? Because it reminded me there were still people worth saving. The words landed like shrapnel. Because that was the thing no one told you about this life. You don't lose your soul all at once. You trade it, piece by piece, for the illusion of duty. They say you're selling intel, she said. They say a lot of things. Are they true? Does it matter? She leveled her rifle anyway, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. Every fiber in her body screamed at the contradiction, the loyalty she owed to command versus the debt she owed to him. You helped me, she said quietly. Once, and now you're here to help them, circle of life. He stood slowly, hands open. You want to know the truth? I didn't sell secrets, I gave them away, to people who were dying because of ours. You think we're the good guys, Hill. We're just better at hiding the bad parts. For the first time in years, she didn't have a response. She thought of Ramirez, dead because of faulty intel. She thought of the hostages she'd saved, the lies she'd told, the things she'd buried under the banner of necessity. And for the first time, she wondered if Eclipse was still the light she thought it was, or just another shadow pretending to be righteous. You're tired, he said softly. So are you. Difference is, I stopped pretending it means something. She stepped closer, the rifle trembled barely. If you didn't betray us, then why run? Because telling the truth makes you the enemy faster than selling it does. He was right. She hated that he was right. You going to do it? He asked. Her finger rested on the trigger. One pull, and it would all be over, clean, untraceable, justified. But she couldn't. Walk away, she said. That's not in the script. I'm not following the script. He smiled again, sad this time. That's what I liked about you. She turned to leave. Then the crack of a rifle. Lancer dropped instantly, a dark bloom spreading across his chest. Norah spun. Core, cease fire, cease fire. He reached for something. Core's voice came through tense. Command said no capture, ma'am. I had to. Norah dropped to her knees beside him. He wasn't dead yet. Not yet. His eyes fluttered open. Guess they got what they wanted, he rasped. No, she said, pressing her hand against the wound. No, stay with me. Don't waste it. You didn't sell us out. No, he whispered, but you'll have to live like you did. Then his breathing stopped. By the time Vega reached her, she was still kneeling there, blood on her gloves, wind tearing at her hair. Hill, we have to move, he said. He wasn't guilty. Doesn't matter now. It matters to me. They burned the outpost per protocol. No evidence, no remains. Just ash scattered across the cliffside. Back at base, Norah didn't file her report. She just sat in the dark, staring at her rifle, the one she hadn't fired. Rains found her hours later. Mission complete, he said quietly. He was innocent. Maybe, maybe not. He helped us. And you helped end him. She looked up sharply. You knew. I suspected. Then why send me? Because I needed to know if you could still follow orders. Her eyes narrowed. And now you know. Yeah, he said softly, now I know. He left her there. That night she couldn't sleep. The image of Lancer's eyes, calm even in death, wouldn't fade. His words echoed through her mind. You'll have to live like you did. She realized that was the cruelest part of all this. Not the missions, not the losses. It was the knowing that every time she obeyed, she chipped away another sliver of the person she used to be. Days passed. Then a message arrived from Hayes. Heard about your assignment, call me. She didn't want to, but she owed him that much. When she did, his voice came through the line, older, raspier but steady. Norah. Sir. You okay? Define okay. You sound like someone who's been carrying too much weight for too long. Comes with the job. Number comes from believing the job defines you. She closed her eyes. Sir, when does it stop? The orders, the gray lines, the part of you that keeps disappearing. It doesn't, he said quietly. You just learn which parts you can live without. Silence stretched between them, a silence that carried every unspoken truth about their kind. Then Hayes said something that cut through her like a blade. Don't let them turn you into what you used to fight against. The line went dead. That night, Norah wrote her after-action report. 3 pages, clean and clinical. No emotion, no confession, just facts. At the bottom, she added one line that wasn't required. Recommendation: review target intelligence procedures. Truth should never die in silence. She hit send. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out the challenge coin, the one that had once made her laugh. She stared at the inscription. 1 operator, 20 enemies, 0 given. And for the first time, it didn't feel like pride. It felt like a wound. She flipped it over. The metal caught the dim light. She closed her fist around it and whispered, maybe courage isn't about acting without fear. Maybe it's about knowing what the fear is trying to protect. Outside, dawn began to break again. The same desert sun she'd seen rise 100 times before. But this one felt different. Colder. Truer. The report vanished into the system like everything else. No reply. No acknowledgement. Just silence, the bureaucratic kind that swallowed truth faster than bullets ever could. Days turned into a week. Then 2. Then 3. And through all of it, Norah kept moving, training, debriefs, endless operations that blurred into repetition. But something inside her had shifted. She still followed orders. But now she watched who gave them. The cracks in Eclipse were subtle. You wouldn't see them if you didn't know what to look for. A mission brief that didn't match intel. A target labeled hostile asset that turned out to be unarmed. A classified file with a signature that didn't belong to anyone in their chain of command. To most, it was noise. To Norah, it was a pattern. And the more she looked, the more the pattern took shape, an invisible hand guiding their missions for reasons no one questioned. Until she found File Delta 7. It was buried deep, hidden behind 3 levels of encryption in a server labeled Logistics Inventory. She hadn't been looking for it. She'd just been trying to reconcile mission data from the last quarter. But when she opened the folder, the screen filled with words that made her stomach drop. Project Eclipse Directive Overview. Objective: covert destabilization of high-risk regions through selective elimination of rogue assets. Primary function: plausible deniability through unilateral field execution. Operational control: Civilian Oversight Division, REDACTED. Authorizing entity, REDACTED. There it was, in black and white. They weren't just rescuing hostages or neutralizing terrorists. They were removing liabilities. People, allies, informants, anyone inconvenient. She stared at the file until the words blurred. Her pulse thudded in her ears, steady, heavy, cold. She'd spent years thinking Eclipse existed to protect what was good. Now she saw the truth. They existed to clean up what was useful and erase what wasn't. She didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Instead, she started testing the edges. Questions disguised as curiosity. Comments tossed into conversation. Listening, watching. Raines noticed first. He always did. "You've been quiet lately," he said one evening, leaning against her doorframe. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About whether we're still the good guys." He didn't answer right away. Then softly, "That's a dangerous question to ask out loud." "Then why do you look like you've been asking it too?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You think Eclipse is clean. None of us are clean, Hill. We just make sure someone else doesn't make the mess worse." You knew, she said quietly. I know enough to keep doing my job, even if it means executing people who don't deserve it. Especially then. She stepped closer. You really believe that? I believe someone has to live with it. Might as well be people who already know how. She stared at him, the silence between them stretching until it hurt. You're better than that, she said finally. No, he said softly, I'm just older. He left, leaving the door open. She didn't close it. That night, Norah copied the file, encrypted it, buried it in her personal drive under an old training log. If she was going to act, she'd need proof. She didn't know what she'd do with it yet. All she knew was this. Silence was no longer an option. A week later, the next operation arrived, Operation Slate Dagger. Target, a weapons broker, operating inside Iraq. Objective, eliminate, destroy infrastructure, deny reconstitution. But when Norah cross-referenced the coordinates, her heart stopped. It was a school. An abandoned one, repurposed as a relief hub by a local NGO. Humanitarian aid workers. Children. She went straight to Rains. Sir, this intel is wrong. Command says it's verified. I checked it myself. Then maybe you shouldn't be checking it yourself. Her voice hardened. They're sending us to kill civilians. No, he said. They're sending us to eliminate a target hiding among civilians. That's not what the file says. He sighed. You're letting that Lancer mission get in your head. He was right, she snapped. We're not fighting evil anymore, we're maintaining it. That caught him off guard. He looked at her for a long moment, the kind of look that carried both warning and sorrow. You walk away from this hill, they'll bury you. Maybe they should. She briefed her team anyway. Professional, calm, controlled. But inside, she'd already made her choice. During the insertion flight, Vega leaned closer. You seem tense. Just focused. Focused, usually, doesn't look like you're about to shoot the guy giving the orders. She glanced at him. If I do, pretend you didn't see it. He smirked faintly. Got it, boss. They touched down near the compound just before dawn. Children's drawings still clung to the walls, faded ghosts of innocence. Core scanned the perimeter. No hostiles, no heat signatures. Then why the hell are we here? Vega muttered. That was the question. And Norah already knew the answer. She turned off her radio. Eclipse hold position, she said. We're aborting. Core looked at her sharply. Say again. We're not doing this. That's not your call. It is tonight. She switched to command frequency. Control, this is Major Hill. Site is cold. No hostiles present, recommend abort. The reply came instantly. Negative, Hill, proceed, destroy the structure. There are civilians here. Collateral is authorized. Her breath caught. Collateral. That word, the one that turned people into statistics. Denied, she said flatly. I'm not burning a school. Static, then a new voice, cold, precise, unfamiliar. Major Hill, this is Oversight Division. You are ordered to comply. Identify yourself. Authorization not required. Her jaw clenched. Then consider this my resignation. She switched off the radio completely. Vega stared at her. You realize they'll come for you after this. Let them. You sure about this, boss? You in or out? He smirked again, eyes narrowing. Always in. Core hesitated. Hill, if we walk away from this, we're done. Then we walk away together. For a moment, no one spoke. Then quietly, Core said, Copy that. They exfiltrated without firing a shot. Left the school untouched. No reports. No signatures. But the silence afterward was deafening. Back at base, security detained them within an hour. Disarmed, confined, interrogated separately. Norah sat in a white room, hands cuffed, waiting. No clock, no sound, just her heartbeat steady, defiant. When the door opened, it wasn't some faceless interrogator who entered. It was Rains. He looked exhausted, older than she'd ever seen him. "You didn't follow orders," he said quietly. "Neither did you when you recruited me." "That was different." "Was it?" He sank into the chair across from her. "You understand what you've done. Stopped a massacre. Started a mutiny. Then call it what it is." He rubbed his eyes. "Command's furious. They're grounding the whole team, stripping clearances. They'll make examples out of you. And you. I'll take the fall. They'll think I lost control." She shook her head. "No, you've carried enough ghosts, sir. You're not saving me from this." "Wasn't trying to." She leaned forward. "There's a file, Rains, Delta 7, proof that oversight been manipulating our missions. You know I'm right. And what exactly do you plan to do with that?" "Expose it." He smiled faintly, the same tired smile Hayes had once given her. "You think the truth survives in a world built on silence? It has to. Then you'd better be ready to fight everyone you've ever served with." "I've been fighting worse." He exhaled slowly, then slid a keycard across the table. "Storage Bay 6, bottom drawer. There's a SATCOM uplink there. Use it before they pull your access." She looked at him, realizing what he was doing. "Why are you helping me?" "Because someone has to remind them we're still human." That night, Norah walked alone through the hangar. The base was silent, too silent. Even the floodlights seemed to hum with suspicion. She found Bay 6. Swiped the card. Inside, equipment crates, sealed comm racks, and a single console glowing in the dark. She inserted her drive. Typed one command. "Upload Project Eclipse classified." The progress bar crawled 10%, 15%, 20%. She listened to her heartbeat, to the faint hum of the machines, to the soft echo of footsteps outside. At 82%, the alarms began. Doors slamming, voices shouting. Rain's voice came through her earpiece. "They're onto you. You've got 60 seconds. That's enough." The upload hit 100%. Transmission complete. She yanked the drive, smashed it under her boot, and ran. Guards rounded the corner just as she slipped into the maintenance tunnel. Flashes of light, shouts. Her breath sharp, her body burning. By the time she reached the airfield, the first helicopters were lifting off. Searchlights swept the desert. She didn't stop running until the base was aglow on the horizon. Hours later, as dawn broke over the sand, Norah climbed a ridge and looked back. Somewhere behind her, Eclipse was burning, not with fire but with revelation. The file was out now. No taking it back. Her comm crackled once, Rain's voice faint, breaking. "They'll call you a traitor, Hill, but don't forget history always starts that way." She smiled, tired and hollow and free. "Then I'll let history decide who I was." For the first time in years, she wasn't following orders. She was following truth. And though the desert wind stung her eyes, she kept walking. Because some wars aren't fought with weapons. Some are fought with memory and conscience and the refusal to look away. The transmission reached 3 continents before dawn. Encrypted servers, hidden accounts, journalists who knew when to run and when to vanish. By the time Eclipse Command realized what had happened, the file was already everywhere. Project Delta 7, Oversight Division, unauthorized assassinations. And one name, redacted in every copy except the original leak. Major Norah Hill. The world didn't explode overnight. It never does. Instead, it started with whispers. Reports on late-night channels, analysts arguing over credibility. Some called it disinformation, others called it treason. But those who knew, really knew, stayed silent. Because silence was safer than truth. Norah spent the first few days moving. Old training kicked in, new routes every dawn, no digital trace, never the same city twice. Lebanon, Cyprus, Crete. Each stop a blur of cheap hostels, strong coffee, and the kind of exhaustion that didn't sleep. It just changed form. She wasn't running from capture. She was running from memory. From Hayes' voice. From Ramirez's question. From Lancer's last words, "You'll have to live like you did." The first time she saw her face on a screen, it didn't feel real. A grainy photo, a headline. U.S. operative behind massive leak, traitor or truth teller. Beneath it, a younger version of her from a ceremony years ago, uniform crisp, eyes full of purpose. She barely recognized herself. The world debated her morality like it was entertainment. To some, she was a hero. To others, a threat. But to herself, she was just tired. Then, one morning in a coastal cafe in Crete, someone sat across from her. Civilian clothes, quiet posture, a face that didn't belong to tourists. She didn't reach for her weapon. Not yet. "Major Hill," the woman said softly, "you've been hard to find." That was the idea. "I'm not here to arrest you." That's what they all say. The woman smiled faintly. "My name's Adler, International Tribunal Oversight. You sent us something interesting." "Did I?" "You did." She slid a small drive across the table. "You didn't just expose Eclipse. You exposed an entire covert network built on managed instability. Your files already triggered 3 internal investigations. You should know that." Norah didn't touch the drive. "And what happens now?" "That depends on how much of you they can bury before the truth becomes useful again." She almost laughed. "So nothing changes?" "Not immediately, but you started something that can't be stopped." Adler leaned closer. "They'll keep hunting you, but not forever. When the dust settles, people will remember what you did." Norah met her eyes. "You really believe that?" "I believe people need someone to remind them the system isn't infallible. You did that." She stood to leave. "One more thing," Adler said. "Someone sent me a message for you." Norah frowned. "Who?" "Rains." Adler handed her a sealed envelope. Then she was gone. Inside the envelope, a single note. Rain's handwriting steady, deliberate. "You were right. They shut Eclipse down. Officially, I'm out. Probably won't last long, but that's fine. You once asked me what to do when the job starts taking pieces of you. You stop counting, Hill. You stop waiting for the pieces to grow back. You just build new ones. If you're reading this, you made it further than I did. Don't look for redemption, just keep walking." She read it twice, then folded it neatly and tucked it into her jacket. That night she walked down to the shore. The sea was black and endless, reflecting nothing. Waves crashed softly against the rocks, steady as breath. She sat there for hours, no uniform, no insignia, just the sound of the world that didn't know her name anymore. And maybe that was the point. She lived her whole life under codes and call signs. Now, for the first time, she was just a person. A week later, a news bulletin flickered across a television in a bar. An investigation into Project Eclipse confirmed civilian casualties in multiple covert missions. Resignations followed. Funding frozen. Public hearings scheduled. They never mentioned her name. But that was fine. She hadn't done it for that. In the following months, she moved inland. Found work under aliases, medical aid convoys, refugee logistics training volunteers. No medals, no rank. Just quiet purpose. Sometimes, when she was alone, she'd still catch herself scanning rooftops or gauging exit routes, the habits of a soldier who'd forgotten how to live in peace. Other times, she'd see children running through dust-filled courtyards, laughing, shouting, alive, and she'd feel something she hadn't felt in years. Relief. Because she'd stopped something. Maybe not a war. Maybe not the system. But one building. One lie. One mission that never became another tragedy. Months later, in a small border town, she heard a familiar voice on the radio. Hayes, older now, retired, speaking on some veterans panel. They'll tell you we're defined by victory, he was saying, by the missions that worked, by the enemies we killed, but that's not what defines us. What defines us is the one time we said no, the moment we refused, the line we didn't cross. His voice caught slightly. Someone once taught me that. She's probably out there somewhere, still fighting in her own way. Norah smiled. Didn't cry. Didn't speak. Just listened. Because sometimes, the only proof that you did something right is hearing someone else still believe it. She stayed in that town for almost a year. Long enough for the nightmares to fade into memories. Long enough for the name Major Hill to stop echoing in her head. One night a convoy of volunteers came through, young, eager, full of light. One of them, a girl barely 20, recognized her. You're her, aren't you? Who? The soldier, the one who. Norah smiled softly. No, I just used to be. The girl frowned. My brother said you saved lives. So did a lot of people. The girl hesitated, then asked. Was it worth it, telling the truth? Norah looked out toward the horizon. The sky was bleeding into twilight, that brief hour when light and shadow were equal. It cost me everything, she said, but it gave everyone else a choice. The girl nodded quiet. Then she smiled, the kind of smile that only the young can carry, the kind that believes change is still possible. Then it was worth it. And just like that, the moment passed. Later that night, Norah opened the envelope again. Rain's letter. The paper was creased now, the ink smudged. She traced the words with her finger. Don't look for redemption, just keep walking. She folded it once more, then stood. The stars were faint tonight, clouds rolling in from the west. The wind carried the smell of rain and dust. She started walking. No destination. Just forward. Sometimes when the night grew too quiet, she'd hear voices, not in madness but in memory. Ramirez, what if I stop remembering why I joined? Hayes, courage isn't the absence of fear. Lancer, telling the truth makes you the enemy faster than selling it. Rains, someone has to remind them we're still human. They were all still with her, the living and the lost, each one carved into the silence she carried. Years passed. The wars changed. The world changed. And somewhere, far from headlines and command centers, an older woman with steady eyes and a quiet voice taught young volunteers how to stop bleeding, how to keep breathing, how to stay human in the middle of chaos. She didn't tell them her name. They just called her the Major. One evening, a boy from the convoy found her sitting outside, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Miss, he asked, you used to be a soldier, right? A long time ago. Why'd you stop? She thought for a long time, then said quietly, because I learned that wars don't end when the fighting does. They end when people remember what they were fighting for. He nodded like he understood, even if he didn't. Then ran off to join the others. Norah watched him go. Then she smiled, small, tired, peaceful. Because maybe, for once, that was enough. The wind picked up, warm and soft. The sky burned gold over the hills. And as she turned back toward the horizon, she whispered something, not to anyone in particular, just to the ghosts that still listened. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And in that moment, as the light faded and the silence deepened, Major Norah Hill, soldier, traitor, truth-teller, finally let the war inside her rest.